conversation. We're delighted to have you join us. We're going to have a great chat today, and we hope you think so too. Helen, it's lovely to be back here with you.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Co-chatting, co-hosting, co-facilitating, whatever we're doing. And we're thrilled to welcome Jack Barry.
Thank you.
Whom I lovingly refer to now as the resident Irish mythologist. And we'll get to that in a little while. But Jack, thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Delighted that you're here.
It's a pleasure.
Jack, we know that people call you Jack. Is that your real name, given name, or what was your name when you grew up?
It is my real name. It's my second name. My full name is Terry Jack Barry, Jr. But Terry Barry sounds too much like the lady whose name we used to see on the North Carolina elevators, Sherry Barry. So I go by Jack, as did my father and as does my son, Terry Jack III, which when we moved to Pittsburgh back in the early mid-'60s, as I was getting my driver's license, I had a hard time convincing the examiner that my name really was Terry Jack instead of Terrence John. And he schooled the Alabama redneck on the fact that we don't put diminutive names on the Commonwealth's driver's license. I had to school him on the naming conventions in the American South. So he finally relented and let me put Terry Jack on the license.
That's a contemporary version of the Civil War that I've never heard before. But
so it's a family name, and it's carried on through your...
It is. It was the name my father was given by his grandmother, who was born during the Civil War. So now young Jack has broken the tradition, though.
Okay.
You know, neither of his sons are cursed with the family name.
Jack, you mentioned Alabama. Tell us a bit about where you were born and where you grew up and went from there.
Well, I was born in Birmingham, Alabama. When I was a little kid, we moved around a bit. Dad was a traveling salesman for a wholesale hardware company. We lived for a while in Columbus, Mississippi, and then I started school in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. We came back to Birmingham for a while. And then at the end of 5th grade, I guess it was, Dad took a job in Bessemer, which is a town adjoining town on the west side of Birmingham. And we moved out there. So I was there for middle school and high school. So since I sort of came of age in Bessemer, I think of that as my hometown. Mm-hmm. And went off from Bessemer to Georgia Tech in Atlanta for a few years. And,
was that a big kind of cultural switch for you?
You mean big city, Atlanta?
Mm-hmm.
Atlanta at that time was not the big city that it is today. It was only slightly bigger than Birmingham back then. But during the 5 years that I was there, the skyline of Atlanta just exploded. That was when they really began the growth spurt. So it was probably more of a culture shock going to Georgia Tech, since all of my high school friends went to either Auburn or Alabama. Mm-hmm. And so we were rivals there for a while. That took some getting used to. Getting used to the academic rigor at Georgia Tech also took some getting used to.
And you did engineering.
Mechanical engineering.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wow. I've always had such admiration for people who do what I think of as serious degrees like that.
Well, I do too, because I was never a particularly good engineer. I got into management as soon as I could.
Many of us at River Landing have moved around quite a bit. Tell us about where your work took you and where you had lived in the past.
Well, we haven't moved around as much as many folks have. When I was in school at Tech, I went on the co-op program, which involved going to school for a quarter followed by a quarter of work, and alternating like that through my time at Tech. When I was on work quarter, I worked for DuPont. They have a big polyester yarn plant in Kinston, North Carolina. So that was my first exposure to North Carolina. And I remember my grandmother thinking that I had moved way up north to Kinston. But after we got married, Dee Dee and I got married as soon as I graduated. And I spent a year in Pittsburgh where I got the driver's license. And then I was with PPG Industries. It was the company, used to be called Pittsburgh Plate Glass back in the day. In fact, it was still Pittsburgh Plate Glass when I joined them. They have a big fiberglass manufacturing plant in Shelby, North Carolina. And so I spent the rest of my career, my whole career was spent with PPG at Shelby. I was able to stay in that location. By the time that I had opportunities to move to other locations, Dee Dee had started what turned out to be a very successful CPA practice in town. So leaving that would have been a little bit of a problem. So we just stayed, and I retired from PPG.
And for those of you not from North Carolina, or even if you are from North Carolina and wonder where Shelby is, it is in Cleveland County, which is just sort of west and maybe a little bit south of Charlotte.
Yeah.
And has a great public school system, but that's another story. And Jack, in Shelby, what did you find yourself doing aside from your work? Because people often, I know, people from urban areas, let's put it that way, may tend to occasionally be a little snooty about places like Shelby and that, but I think you and I and some others know it to be a very kind of thriving and alive sort of place with all kinds of interesting things. But
it is.
What was it like being a professional engineer in that community?
Well, it was, there were a lot of engineers in the community because of PPG on the one hand. Fiber Industries was another large plant there. They made synthetic fibers. So there were a fair number of engineers there.
Yeah. How big was PPG?
PPG at its maximum employed almost 2,000 people at that plant. And the Fiber Industries plant was of a similar size. Yeah. Shelby was a great place to raise kids, raise a family, which we did, of course. I tried to take up golf. I thought it would be good for business reasons, if nothing else. And I quickly found that in order to play well enough that I could enjoy the game, it was going to take a lot more time than I was willing to put into it. So about the time that the kids came along, I sort of hung up my golf club and wanted to spend more time with them. But Shelby, over the years that we lived there, it evolved significantly from a fairly quiet little, mostly agricultural-based community to a fairly vibrant arts scene today. So it's Shelby's a neat little town. If folks would like to go visit it and visit the Earl Scruggs Museum, which is quite a draw.
Yes.
That's some things you can do in Shelby.
Jack, our next question we want to talk to you about is one that people at River Landing know you well about, and that's music. So tell us some things about your favorite music and how it fits into your life.
Okay. In 1999, our youngest daughter was well, let me back up. All my life, I enjoyed music, all kinds of music, classical music, popular music, folk music, whatever. And I listened to a lot of music. But in 1999, our youngest daughter was a junior in high school, and she was playing violin in the high school orchestra. And she decided that she wanted to take some lessons in Irish and Scottish fiddling. So we looked around for summer programs, and we found the Swannanoa Gathering, which is a series of folk music and folklore workshops that are put on each summer at Warren Wilson College up in Swannanoa outside Asheville. So we went there, and I had just retired, so I was footloose and fancy free. So I went as the daddy, and Carol went to take the fiddle lessons. And it was just a wonderful experience. Carol, unfortunately, didn't enjoy it that much and has never been back, but I've not missed a year since then. And I'd never done music before. I'm not particularly musical. But I said, I need to have something to do that will let me come here and take classes. So I decided that I could play the Irish drum, the bodhrán, which is a big round thing you hold here and play with a hand like this. Because I could beat on my knees and I could beat on the dashboard at a stoplight. So I bought a bodhrán, and the rest is history, as they say. So I go every year to that, and I have taken not only lessons in the drum, but also lessons in folklore, Irish and Scottish folklore, Irish mythology. Every time they have a class in that, I take it. And the Irish traditional music, the jigs and reels and hornpipes and polkas and mazurkas even, seem to resonate with me. The structure of the music is, I enjoy that. And I've gotten a real kick out of the folklore, the mythology.
Well, tell us some more about that, because your class was just very enlightening. And
Thank you.
tell us how you got interested in storytelling.
Well, a couple of classes that I've taken at the Swannanoa Gathering were in storytelling. Both of them taught by Irishmen. And there's more to telling a story than just spilling it out. I won't get into all of that, but there are a lot of things to keep in mind when you're telling a story. Most of them designed so you won't mess the story up. But I guess there's enough ham in me that I don't mind standing up in front of a group of people and sort of making a fool of myself by over-emoting and getting all carried away with the story. It's fun for me, and people seem to enjoy it. So it's interesting. The mythology classes I've taken up there, some have been taught by instructors who focused on the story itself and the psychology of the characters, and it was very enjoyable. Other classes I've taken were taught by storytellers, and they focused on the stories. And I remember asking one of them before I was to give the first class here, what would he suggest? How would he suggest that I approach it? And he says, the stories, man, just the stories. So that's kind of what I've tried to do. And it's been fun. I enjoy that.
I should tell our listeners that our audience who may not have been here when the Irish mythology courses were offered by Furrow, that we put, Jack and I chatted, and we put a description together, put it in the in Compass, and we had a limit, I think, of maybe about 12 or 14 or something like that on the class, and something like 68 people signed up, and we thought, holy cow! This was, and Jack very graciously and kindly, and there were 3 sessions for the class, and very graciously and kindly said, well, he would work through the waiting list in groups of about 12, and that's when I kind of dared to suggest that Jack would be teaching Irish mythology at River Landing for the rest of his life, and we hoped it was going to be a long life. If you could stand one more story, we talked about this before we started this, that our meeting first may have been prophetic or designed by more senior powers, because probably the most famous Irish instrumental group over the last 50 or 60 years is the Chieftains. And if you know anything about Irish music, you cannot not have heard of the Chieftains. Well, about 3 years ago, the Chieftains came to Greensboro, and Helen, the other Helen in my life, and I went with our neighbors, Carrie and Barb Gustafson, to the Carolina Theater, and we're standing around in the lobby waiting for the place to open, and Carrie looked over and said, "I think that couple over there is from River Landing." And that couple turned out to be Jack and Dee Dee, and we went over and said hello, and well, it turned out in the luck of the draw then, when we went in the theater, that Jack and Dee Dee's seats were right beside us, down towards the front of the theater. And the Chieftains, they do a pretty different kind of concert than most other people. Aside from performing themselves, they're very good about bringing up local talent and having them join in a number or do a little gig or something like that. And to our astonishment, at one point they brought up a local pipe and drum corps of about maybe 10 or 12 people, something like that. And Jack's son and daughter-in-law were in this group. And let me tell you, watching a set of parents watch their children perform with the world-renowned Chieftains was, I thought, what a way for a connection to start. And we've had lots of lovely Irish and non-Irish discussions in the meantime. But
yeah, that was a great way to meet.
That was a really fun.
When I found out there was a Dubliner here at River Landing, I said, "Oh, we're going to get along very well."
Can you relate to us something that you would like River Landing folks to know that we might not know about you?
Well, yes. There is a thing called the Bulwer-Lytton Fiction Contest. It's a writing contest, international contest, where entrants are to write the worst opening sentence to the world's worst novel. So it's a contest of bad writing. It's named after Edward Bulwer-Lytton, a British novelist back in the Victorian times, whose novel, Paul Clifford, I believe is the name of it, began with the sentence, the first phrase of which was, "It was a dark and stormy night." So anyway, so I encountered that, and I said, well, you know, maybe I could write I'm pretty sure I could write poorly. So I sent in some entries, and lo and behold, I won the adventure category. So there are a number of different categories, and a grand winner gets money, $250. But I won the adventure category, and had a dishonorable mention in the purple prose category. So I am an awarded poor writer.
Well, Jack, that begs the question.
Yeah.
What was...
I thought you might ask. I don't know whether it sounds as good as it should, but so this was to be the novel was supposedly a murder mystery set down in Louisiana. That's the idea. From the limbs of ancient live oaks, moccasins hung like fat black sausages, which are sometimes called boudin noir, black pudding or blood pudding. Though why anyone would refer to a sausage as pudding is hard to understand, and it's even more difficult to divine why a person would knowingly eat something made from dried blood in the first place. But be that as it may, Our tale is of voodoo and foul murder, not disgusting food. The judge, of which there is only one, apparently liked that one.
Boy, I could see another furl course in the making here.
Yeah, the only thing you get if you don't win the main prize is he will contact your local newspaper and tell them so they can write an article about it. So the headline of the article in the Shelby newspaper was, "Area Man Wins Bad Writing Award." It was great fun.
What a hoot, what a hoot. Well, Jack, one of our favorite questions here is if there's three people in time that you would like to have a visit with, either together or individually, who would they be and why do you have those people in mind?
Well, this is going to sound a little weird probably, but as you probably know, genetic studies have determined that those of us with European ancestry carry 1 to 2% Neanderthal DNA in our genomes. So I would like first to have dinner with my last Neanderthal ancestor, because I think it would be fascinating to find out how much alike we were and how different we were. Secondly, I would have to pick Benjamin Franklin, I guess. I've always admired Renaissance men, and Franklin certainly fit that bill. Mm-hmm. And then thirdly, my maternal grandfather, who when I was I died when he died when I was 11, and he was a great storyteller himself, and he would tell me all these tall tales about the Indians and going out west, and most of which, even at that young age, I figured were tall tales. And it wasn't until I was an adult that I learned that no, most of those, in fact, were true. Wow. He had, in fact, met Geronimo, the Indian. He had been in San Francisco in 1906 when the earthquake hit. So I would like to now be able to sit down and pick his brain about his life. So.
How interesting. Wow.
Can you relate to us several, one or more, whatever you want to, experiences you've had at River Landing that have been interesting to you?
Well, we've talked about a lot about probably the biggest thing, the experience I've had being involved in FURL as a member of the work group and as a presenter of the classes. That's something that I had no inkling would happen before we came here. And I'm just so happy that it has happened. I've enjoyed that a lot. I guess the other thing is I'm amazed at how unremittingly happy and friendly people are here, both staff and residents. Dee Dee and I wonder, or kind of wish we had done this sooner. Why did we wait so long to come? So we love River Landing.
Neat. As you thought about this conversation before it happened, are there things that kind of went through your mind that we haven't talked about, or that we might be sort of leaving out? I guess it's another variation on what would you like people to know about you, or not? But are there other points that we might cover?
I guess the only thing I can think of off the top of my head is I might have thought that you would have asked how Dee Dee and I met. How did you meet your wife? And I know maybe you kind of try to steer clear of family things too much in these discussions, but I thought that might come up. And it turns out that we met when I sat behind her in 9th grade algebra class. Her maiden name was Ball, and Barry sat right behind Ball. So that's how we met. We had one date in high school, and our next date was sophomore year in college.
Wow.
So, took a while before she would agree to go out with me again, I guess.
Well, if I could, one of our favorite stories that emerged that we didn't know about was the time on the Tom and Lisa show when they asked the question about the play that My Fair Lady comes from. And if you recall, you and I had been on that show a week or two earlier talking about Furl or something, and lo and behold, Lisa said we have a winner, and the winner was Jack and Dee Dee, who had not looked it up on Google, but had actually on a high school class trip in something like 1961 or thereabouts, had gone to New York City and had gone to the original stage production in New York of My Fair Lady, yeah, and knew that, of course, that it came from Pygmalion, and another Irish guy, George Bernard Shaw, was the genius behind that.
Yeah, the only original cast member that was still left in the show when we saw it was Stanley Holloway, yeah, who was Liza's daddy, Doolittle, Mr. Doolittle.
Yes.
But yeah, there was, in fact, you have submitted a lot of questions, trivia questions, to the Tom and Lisa show, and I have actually won twice, or Dee Dee and I have, both of them on questions that you put in. So we're a little concerned that people may suspect collusion.
There's a conspiracy going on.
The fact that you asked me to share the wine is not germane.
And I could say, apropos that, Brian, thank you for delivering the wine to the right address.
And a full bottle.
And a full bottle.
Yeah.
Great.
Jack, what would you say was your biggest surprise about River Landing?
Just how happy and friendly folks seem to be. I have yet to meet a grouch here. Not that there aren't some, I'm sure, and I'm sure at certain times of the day, especially in the morning, if you came across me, you might find someone on the grouchy side until I've had my cup of coffee. But no, just, and I guess during the pandemic, the support that the administration and the staff have, all the work they've done to keep us safe and make being quarantined essentially somewhat pleasant. Tom and Lisa and their staff have just been remarkable. Amen. And I can't think of a better place we could have been during those times that hopefully are now
easing on down
the road.
Yes.
Yeah.
Jack, thank you. This has been a lovely conversation, and we look forward to more mythology. I should remind people that if you see Jack's name in future Furl sessions, there's almost an ironclad guarantee of an absolutely wonderful time.
Hurry and sign up. Hurry and sign up.
Sign up, yes.
Thank you very much. You're very kind.
Because his patience with long waiting lists may naturally expire at some point. Thank you for joining us for another conversation around River Landing. We will be back in a week from now with our good friend Mary Adamson, who has her own set of amazing stories to tell, and we look forward to having her share them with you. Thank you, Helen. Thank you, Jack. Thank you, Brian and Destiny. And we look forward to our next session next Friday afternoon. Thank you.